was very effective not responding, because he actually just kind of said his piece and then he went, okay, let's go back to the car. And it was all over Red Rover and there was no forcing or anything. It was a relief.
And just to finish that story off,
Yeah.
at this point in time, I'd taken the others and we sort of kept going, and we'd stopped a bit further up. But when Jodi and I came back together, the kids had all reset.
Yeah.
It's just us being a bit older and more set in our ways, and why aren't our kids doing what we expect?
Yes.
Sound like my parents.
I know you do.
But coming back together, and Jodi just sort of looked at me straight in the eyes and said, I choose you.
Yeah.
And all that frustration I had at the children, at the whole situation, was just gone.
Yeah, you did.
And that's true power of words. So
hello, beautiful community. We are here for another chat. And this week we are talking about
the power of words.
Yes, which is really, really important in our household. Don't always get it right, but in this episode, we're going to talk about the power of words, and it's a really nice follow-on from our last chat about effing the shoulds. As a way of introduction, I am Jodi from QuantiMama.
And I'm McGill from QuantiPapa.
Yeah, and together we are working our way through this sludge called life with 4 crazy kids that is continually teaching us better ways to live this life.
And it is non-stop, isn't it? The lessons come hard and fast. And sometimes we need to just stop and reflect on that and work out how the hell we're going to cope with what comes next.
Absolutely. So we want to talk about the power of words, and it's funny because we can come at this from multiple different ways, but one of the things that I think really resonates for us is talking about the words, like why we decide to call these conversations F the shoulds or Faark the Shoulds, because even should in itself has so much power, doesn't it?
It does, and every word does. And intonation and gusto and meaning behind a word is also something we might get into later on. So that can be tone in that. But today we're just going to look at the power of each individual word and the words that we use in our day-to-day lives, in particular with our partners, with our family, with our friends, and some examples hopefully of how if you can just change a little bit of how we talk to one another and the words we use, then the different interaction you can get with the people around you.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of the things I feel really strongly about is that words don't even just have a meaning from, say, me saying something and you receiving it, say, but there is also a communal understanding or energy around that word.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was really illustrative, and I've spoken about this in the past, I had this really seminal experience when I was chatting with a friend, with a dear friend, with a conversation, and at the end of it, she turned around and said, "Oh, I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time." And we'd had a really heartfelt conversation, and the word sorry, it just struck me as really like the conversation hadn't found a place of peace. There was not a high vibe feel about it. And I had this really impromptu moment where we basically drilled down on what that statement meant to her, and then what the residual, the follow-up sentences meant to her. And it was really upsetting in the end, because the sorry actually equated to her feeling worthless and her time, her taking up my time, which was really sad. That was the intonation.
Yeah, but just to put in context, this friend wanted to debrief a few things that were frustrating them in their life.
Yeah.
And we all need to do that. It's great if we do it. And to get partway through something that affects you so much, or get towards the end of it, and then to apologize for sharing that with someone who you trust and who cares about you and you care about, really undervalues the whole bit.
The whole relationship.
Yeah.
Because in fact, in that moment, what happened was it devalued even the conversation we'd spent, like the half an hour we'd spent. And I'd been really present and so had she. So, in fact, it was a very worthwhile transaction in that sense. But one of the things that I encourage her to do in that moment was to use the word thank you. And that's something that I try and pick up all the time. Like, we have this joke in our household now that every time the kids misuse sorry, in terms of they say sorry and it's not a real sorry, or it's kind of this sort of programming sorry where it's, sorry I'm late, or sorry I didn't do the dishes because I was busy reading. I'm like, you're not really sorry. You were busy reading a book. That opportunity to actually say sorry loses impact. And so now we're trying to get the kids aware of their language in that way, even when they talk about themselves. And if they misuse a sorry, they've got to do 5 push-ups. So it's a silly little thing, but we want to bring awareness to this, particularly with the kids, because they'll have the ripple effect as they get older of using language in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, and sorry has its place. There's no doubt at
course.
points in time in our life, something will happen and we'll be sorry for our actions or what's occurred or how it's impacted somebody else. But trotting it out all the time, which is what Jodi's getting at, just saying it for the sake of saying it, suddenly becomes really a 5-letter word that means nothing.
Yeah.
And the more and more,
or it means a lot, like you're actually really taking away from yourself. Like it can have both those effects, can't it?
But more and more, I would say we're losing the value of that particular word.
Yeah.
And that's just one. And
I mean, by the same token, when you say thank you, it triggers off this gratitude sort of response in your body, doesn't it? So, like, I don't want to subscribe to being overly grateful, but I actually think it's a pretty nice way to live life, Not that life is always sunshine and rainbows, but there is value in all experiences because they create the sum of your life thus far. So there's actually a place for that gratitude. But when we actually swap sorry out for thank you, we can actually have quite a different experience. They're just such tiny experiences, and a million of them happen every day. But there's something that adds up within that I think when we misuse words like say sorry, and either it loses impact, like McGill was saying, or it we tell ourselves subconsciously we don't have a worthiness around whatever it is that's happening. That has it's quite a necrotic effect on your mental health. Like, I think it really just eats away at your sense of well-being and serenity. And they're the things that really interest me, is how do we put circuit breakers in our language? Because once we become aware of the potential impacts of what we're saying, then there's a responsibility to ourselves, unless you want to rock a victim state, but there's a responsibility to ourselves to actually be mindful and intentional with our language.
And also, similarly, really with that word sorry at the moment, in the whole interaction that Jodi had with his friend, the thank you is far more appropriate.
Yeah.
Not sorry for unloading on you. It's thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And creating that space, because that acknowledges Jodi as a person that has created that space, has received it, and has held that space for that party at that point in time.
Yeah.
So
right. It's funny. One of the things I want to just touch on really quickly, and look, this piece of information I picked up listening to another conversation with this guy who was just wildly interesting. His name's Harold Kaltzveller, and I probably mispronounced that, so I apologize, Harold. Anyway, something that he said, he just kind of dropped it into this conversation, and I just thought, wow, that is confounding. He said, junk DNA looks awfully like language. And when I heard that, it felt like things just fell into place. And I suddenly thought, nothing happens in nature by accident. It is all there and very purposeful. So even the language around junk DNA, the power of junk DNA, which is the very fabric of life.
Well, it suddenly makes us feel as though, in this case, DNA is irrelevant.
Yes. That's right.
It doesn't acknowledge the fact that it's because we don't know what it does.
Correct. It's
or where
actually,
it leads.
it's a very misleading label, isn't it?
It
Because in
is.
fact, the limitation is on our understanding, not actually on the incredible creation that we are, you know, these trillions of cells in community that work together so harmoniously. So what I want to sort of just have as an idea plant for you is the idea that perhaps if that is so, and I'm sure there are many people that will disagree, but if that is so, that junk DNA is actually language or language receptors, then how we use words, the intonation we give them, the intonation that the receiving person gives them, because everything is energy, everything is communication. As soon as you hear something, you suddenly transmit some kind of signal. The energy around what the community ascribes to that word as well, right? Junk in the community is considered something that we would
Get rid
is a
of.
bother.
Yeah,
Correct.
we don't need it.
Correct.
Don't
That's
even
right.
look at it.
If we can't get rid of it, we certainly ignore it. So if that's the case, imagine, if you will, these incredible bodies that are so intelligent in every other facet that it actually makes very little sense we would have junk in our body.
Well, not put there from the beginning anyway.
Well, anyway, so is it possible that the power of words is actually far more important than even just the choice around whether you say sorry or thank you?
True.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. And that, looking at those two examples there, we're really looking at a very holistic example of the power of words.
Yes.
What I want to do now is I want to bring it back to us.
Okay.
So
It makes me a bit nervous.
And this has been an evolution for both of us. We've grown together. The beautiful thing is that our relationship, we made the choice to grow together, and so that has led to us meeting all sorts of different challenges in life, and surviving 4 kids and moving on and growing up and continually trying to high vibe ourselves.
What was the topic tonight?
Yeah, the power of words, which is where I'm getting to. This is my point.
Okay.
Is that very early on in the relationship, we made a commitment with our words to speak to one another with words that in a community feel and from one another have a power of loving or care about them.
Yeah.
So I will always use the words, I'll always say darling when I talk to Jodi. And that way, and it's just become so second nature now that, funnily enough, sometimes we get pulled up aside by people when we're having a conversation or with people we didn't know. Did you just call her darling before you asked her to? Oh, yes. And we don't even think about it.
No.
But the power of words, and I look at that word, and when I say it's Jodi, I'm thinking of how much, trying to encapsulate what she means to me. And so when I'm talking to her, I'm using that word with reverence.
Yeah.
And when we communicate with one another, even when we're frustrated, I still change my intonation because I can be frustrated and be darling.
Yeah.
But
I frustrate you a lot too.
But when that word comes out, it also recenters me back into, yes, I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
But that's the person that I truly care about. And we bring that language into how we talk with our kids as well.
I like that you just corrected yourself on the try too, because that's another one that we have in our household is the kids will say try or will or, any of those words that suggest you haven't actually attained the goal. And this was something that I became really focused on when I was reading a lot of Joe Dispenza's stuff, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, so good. Like, just get yourself across his work. He's got some tremendous books out there, books or audio books, however you want to consume your info. But yeah, he would say that the word try or want is in a lack state. So if you try something, you haven't actually attained it. And when we talk about the power of words and, this idea of, manifestation and positive thinking and affirmations, and I really rate a lot of those things. I know they've sort of been hijacked in some ways by the airy fairies and, what I would call the false richness of life, you know, the part of community that are interested in fast cars and mansions, right? The secret. So you get yourself this big house through positive mindset. And look, all power to you if that's your jam. But you know, the richness for us in life is time together, community connection, being of service, spending time with our kids in the great outdoors, the really simple things in life that actually don't cost money, which is, you know, super. But the thing I was going to say is that what you can see in real time, because we're totally unscripted. I don't know if you can tell. I think we're covering it pretty well. But we are auto-correcting as we're talking. So those things, you don't ever, well, I think it's highly unlikely you ever get to a point of, you know, being absolutely perfect in your use of words. And God knows I don't want to be perfect anyway. I like being fallible.
And the goalposts change as well. I mean, the power of words changes.
Yeah.
What a word means between Jodi and I might mean something different between you and your partner.
Yes.
But the other thing that came with us choosing the path of always trying to talk to one another really from a place of love meant that the interaction, even if it was one that was going to be one from a spot of frustration or even from a spot of anger or even from a spot of need, all of a sudden it changes because we're recentering ourselves back onto what that word means to us. So yes, there might be frustration when I'm saying that, darling, but at the same time, I'm still choosing to use a word that comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
And that word has a bit of power then to help me in this instance to just change my opportunity to change my mindset or the way that I'm talking. It also allows Jodi to hear you're frustrated, but you're still 100% head over heels with me because you are straight back to those words that we've always used.
I know, we say I choose you.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
I choose you. Which, you know, after how long have we been married now?
Is that a trick question?
I'm not really sure either. Could be around 17 years. Is that right?
I'll be 17 years this year.
17 years. Okay, good. All right, we're good. We're good. It's funny. We've been saying that for the best part of, say, 15 years, pretty much since kids started arriving. And, you know, they are the litmus test of a relationship, aren't they? They are the bonds that either bend, break or strengthen, you know, and sometimes you go through cycles of that as well, you know. And I think in those times when you are in the fits of absolute sleep deprivation, where it's this sort of, you know, it snowballs, doesn't it? You get it doesn't end for a while there. That's where you can actually get a bit sloppy with your words and a bit short. And so in those moments where we would be really quite, you know, impatient with each other, or just perhaps we'd used to reference, there was this awesome YouTuber who talked about the mum job, essentially the mum task, and she talked about having a Faark jar, which I just loved so much, and it was so good, you know. But you'd basically run out of Faarks is how we would describe it. You were all out, and so when you were at that sort of point and just not being mindful with your language, we would come back to I choose you.
Yes.
And it was such it's such a fast recentering thing, isn't it? I mean, we literally used it. Wasn't it yesterday we were about ready to give away one of the kids?
that can happen a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was as simple as that. We were both just getting to that point where we'd had an amazing day. We'd done all these, we'd had this beautiful experience with the kids.
Yeah.
We'd had a few things we had to do, but we got up early. We went for a drive. We jumped in the ocean together.
Yeah. Magical spot.
Beautiful morning.
Yeah. If you were doing Facebook Live, you would take photos of all those highlights and it would just look like the best day.
And it was.
Yeah.
It was cruising along.
Yeah.
And then we got
the SH1T hit the fan for a while.
The kids' breakfast out as a nice gift for them as well. And as soon as breakfast was done, that was it.
The bundle got dropped.
The kids had enough.
Yeah.
And all we needed to do was to walk back to the car, which was probably about a K away.
Yeah, it was too hard.
And it was on.
Yeah.
You know, and not just one child. Normally you get one. Well, it started with one, then it went to the next. And so I had sort of 3 boys at one point that were just hammer and tong at one another, and sort of, you know, drag the oldest one away. I said, no, come on, bud. Let's why don't you just walk ahead? And got to the next one, and then the youngest, God bless his cotton socks.
Yes.
He let the fuck jar rip.
Oh yeah, he did. He's our swearer, so I'm very proud. I've got a child that takes after me. But yeah, like he was dropping F-bombs here, there, and everywhere, clearly thinking he was actually going to get some kind of response from me. And this is the other side of the power of words, is that the ship has sailed so long ago and so far away to reel in this kid's use of language that I just said to McGill, don't worry, we've got to pick our battles with this one, because he is so beautifully headstrong, isn't he?
He is. And the other side of this, of the power of words, is the power we ascribe to the word when you said.
Yes.
So I'll be the first to put my hand up and say, I have a real issue with the F-bomb.
With the exception of naming a podcast.
Well, yeah. But that's Faark, not.
It's technically different.
And that's part of my upbringing.
Yes. And you felt really strongly about that.
And I did for a very long time. And so instead of headstrong, you know, young bull, old bull sort of coming together, I've changed how what power I ascribe to that word. I still choose not to use it as very often. But when he uses it, I don't think it's funny. No. But I don't think that it doesn't have the power that it once had on me. So my reaction to it is suddenly different.
Yes.
And there's even been a couple of times when he's let it rip.
Yeah.
Generally not in public, but where I can actually see the funny side of it.
Yes.
You know, because I think, you know what, if that had happened to me or that was occurring at that point in time, I'd probably want to say that too.
Yes, that's right. But I mean, having said that yesterday, it was just him venting, and kids learn fast, right? This kid is 7, so he's reaching this age of consciousness, although I suspect he may have been there for a little while already. He knows his own mind.
Yes, he does.
But when he used the F-bomb in public, he didn't swear at me. He just was swearing about his life and his family that don't love him, allegedly. And I just let it go, and I didn't even react. I don't think you can not react, but I held space. Totally overused term, but again, what it basically means is I sat in the observer seat and I didn't correct or direct anything he was doing. I literally just stood near him and just let him vent. And actually, I was really impressed. He must have known that the word was kind of not really for consumption in a busy beach coastal town. So he kind of was dampening it down. So I think in some ways he actually knows the power of words as well, but he wanted to release into feeling that as well. But it was very effective not responding, because he actually just kind of said his piece and then he went, okay, let's go back to the car. And it was all over Red Rover, and there was no forcing or anything. It was a relief.
And just to finish that story off, at this point in time, I'd taken the others and we sort of kept going, and we'd stopped a bit further up. But when Jodi and I came back together, the kids had all reset.
Yeah.
It's just us being a bit older and more set in our ways, and why aren't our kids doing what we expect?
Yes.
Sound like my parents.
I know you do.
But coming back together, and Jodi just sort of looked at me straight in the eyes and said, I choose you.
Yeah.
And all that frustration I had at the children, at the whole situation, was just gone.
Yeah, I did.
And that's true power of words. So with your loved ones around you and with the people that are near and dear to you, bringing that language in from a place of love, and acknowledging who they are and showing your love through the words that you choose to use when you interact with them can change the whole dynamic of where you are.
And choosing how you respond to some words too, because the power of words also can really refer to whether you oxygenate them. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say with that little, fun thing that we did yesterday in the middle of the street. I didn't I didn't give any fuel to the word, so therefore it lost its power. And one of the things we really want to talk about in the coming conversations is radical self-responsibility. And I think part of that radical self-responsibility is noticing when words have power or effect on you and recognizing maybe you're the one that's actually fueling that response.
Mm.
And so part of that radical self-responsibility is actually thinking, maybe it wasn't intended in the way I received it. And I think in this world of division, we would do well to start taking responsibility for how we receive words. And if you don't particularly like something, then you don't give it oxygen. You don't stay in the situation either, but you don't let it, put you into a victim state.
And I'd strongly encourage you, if you hear words or language that's maybe directed towards you or at somebody else, and let's say you do remove yourself from the situation or something does, examine why.
Yeah.
Why does that word trigger you?
And
just, if you're comfortable with it, deep dive into that when you're by yourself or a conversation with someone you really trust.
Yeah.
And deep dive into why that word has power over you.
Yeah. It's like the 7 layers. When I hear that word, it means this. When I feel that, then that means this. And just trying to get a concept on where the root goes with those words. But look, I think the main thing that we want to say is, there is absolutely power in the words. Quite possibly we are, just these incredible receptacles or antennas for language, body language, emotional language, energetic language. So when words have impact, we understand why they have such impact, but it doesn't mitigate the fact that we could actually have some effect on how we receive it and how the discourse that we go through then in response. And
that perception of the word, and perception is reality. How you perceive something is how is going to shape your reality.
Yeah.
So having a bit of control when you hear something and go, oh, that's triggering, and then potentially changing your perception of that particular word, changing the power that it has, so that the next time you hear it, it doesn't hold sway over you.
Yeah.
You take that bit of power back.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if nothing else, start regarding sorry as a should that should be fucked. Because really, that's a good starting point, isn't it?
It is a good starting point. It is well overused.
Yeah.
It does have a place, though. We still need it within our language with one another. In a true case where there is something that need to be.
That's like a caveat that you don't need to say. But if you're sorry, you should be sorry. But if you're sorry for being 5 minutes late, I mean, geez Louise, don't apologize for that. Thank you for your patience.
And hopefully, if you're saying sorry to someone for being 5 minutes late, hopefully the person that's hearing that's going, no, I know that you were busy doing stuff. I know that you had things to do. I'm thankful that you're here.
Yeah.
Rather than, you're 5 minutes late.
Yeah. But the impact of just saying thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
It changes the whole transaction or interaction with the other person anyway.
And you don't give away your own power there.
Absolutely. Keep your power. Right on.
Right on.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us, beautiful people.
Bye.